The interview, I was interviewed by our lab manager or lead BMS and the STP director for the South, or Berkshire and Surrey, I think it is. And I got, so the first like half of it was just about the immunology lab, about immunology, very theory based. I can't remember all the questions, but yeah, so it was very theory based. And immunology was all right because I had just done my immunology exam at uni. So I was like, oh, let me try and remember as much as I can from that. The lab side was a little bit more difficult because I never seen an immunology lab. I was working off whatever I learned from uni. I never know if it's a good thing or a bad thing to do this, but I was quite honest with them and I said to them, I've never been in an immunology lab and what I'm saying or like is what I've either read or heard of. And my best friend had done a placement during her biomed year. I didn't do a placement year. So we both kind of helped each other out in terms of like she would tell me about her experiences in a lab. I told her about third year and like dissertation work and things like that. So we both kind of, that was really helpful because she did a bit of immunology and I kind of worked off of that. So then obviously when she got to third year, she had a better understanding of like third year and how that worked. So it was quite nice. So I mentioned that to them and I said, even though I didn't get the experience, I tried to learn more about it. And I'm hoping that was kind of a pointer of she was keen to learn. She's enthusiastic, that kind of thing. And then the second half was more personality based. So this was done by the STP director. And this is more questions about, how you've handled conflict, stressful situations. I want to say there was a question about mental health, but I can't remember. And it was kind of just asking like, how do you manage your mental health? And that's a question that I think it's really important that you don't just act like, no, nothing gets to me, I'm absolutely fine, because that's not true. And of all places, like the NHS is a really stressful environment. So it's completely normal to feel like something's gonna, something might trouble you, but it's how do you respond to that? How do you manage that? And that kind of thing. So they were really interesting questions. For the second half, so the immunology side, I would say I wasn't as confident. For the transferable skills, that is where I brought out all the stuff I had learned from working at like an optician's, working when I used to do like private tutoring for younger children, that kind of stuff. That's where I was gathering all those transferable skills. And I think, a lot of people are worried that they don't have the right skills or experience or not enough. And like if I can testify to that, like it's absolutely fine if the like previous experience that you do have might actually be enough, or if it depends on how you kind of phrase it. What have you learned from those skills? The opticians, I never thought that was ever going to be useful, but it has been. And actually there's a lot of crossover between that and healthcare. So, and I didn't know that, I just didn't realize it. But then in the interview, that was where I was able to expand on that and really bring that up. So that was great. And then obviously because I was in third year, I haven't got my final year results. So I got the offer, like they accepted the interview, and so I passed the interview, but the offer was obviously conditional that I met the entry requirements, so 2-1. So I got that in August-ish, so confirmed my place, and then started in September.
Then, okay, what about your interview experience? What was your interview like?
Yes, so I was extremely nervous. Oh my gosh, but I had prepared extensively, like we just talked about. I was just looking over the document that I wrote up to prepare for my interview, and it was 64 pages long of notes that I made. So just to give some general advice about how to prepare for that interview. Basically, I created a Google Doc and I started collating information from everywhere on the internet, anywhere I could find tips about the interview, because there's different Instagrams and YouTube channels where you can get tips. So I just started putting all the tips in one place, and also used the Discord asking current trainees how I should focus my research for the interview and prepare for it, which led me to discovering that there's 3 general types of questions. One of them is general science questions, which is more about healthcare science and patient care and the NHS, those types of topics. Then there are specialism specific questions, which is about knowledge that you have within your own specialism. And then there are values and behavior questions, which focus on teamwork, equality, diversity questions might come up. So those are the 3 areas you sort of want to be preparing for. And what I did was I thought up all of the example questions I could possibly think of and then worked through and answered them and thought of as many examples as I could to try and answer my own practice questions that I was coming up with. And also another thing I did, which I really recommend, is having the courage to cold message people on LinkedIn, either current trainees or current people working in your specialism. And when you message them, it's really good to say something like, hey, these are the areas I'm studying for the interview. Would you add anything to this? Rather than just saying like, hey, I need help on this interview. It's good to come to them with, you know, I'm trying, this is what I'm trying to do. Is there anything you would add that maybe I missed on what I could be researching for this interview? And that worked out really well for me. And I had some really, really helpful and kind people through LinkedIn help me narrow down the topics that I would need to research for the interview. So that's what I did. And it ended up being 64 pages. But I felt that I answered every question that came up in the interview. Nothing like stumped me. It was all things that I had covered in my research leading up to it. So I felt pretty confident after it, which was good. And I did end up getting offered and getting my first choice. So that was really, really good. Another tip that I have is this could be a good time to use AI tools like ChatGPT, which I know is maybe a little controversial, but ChatGPT was really, really good with helping me prepare for the interview because I could ask it, I need to think of some questions that might come up regarding this topic. What types of questions might come up? And it will generate areas for you to think about or things like that. It was really, really useful. What else? Ooh, another good thing that I did that I would recommend doing is I researched emerging innovations in my field. Because there might, I can't remember if there's actually questions that come up about it, like tell us about an emerging innovation. But when it comes to the point of the interview where the floor is opened up and you can ask questions to your interviewers, it makes you look really, really good if you can say, I'm aware of this emerging technology. Is this something that you're looking to apply in your team, or has this become relevant to you at all? And then they'll go, oh, good question, you know.
Yeah.
That's a really strong way to end the interview, is to have questions prepared, and especially about upcoming topics is a really good question to prepare, I would say.
Wow. Wow.
I did a lot of preparation. Especially coming from someone that I think if you maybe work in an NHS lab, you maybe wouldn't have to, but I was aware that because I hadn't worked in an NHS lab before, I thought I really need to understand this and really know it to a level to which I can adapt easily in an interview. I think in my head anyway, I couldn't have just memorized all the stuff I need to do. But if we look at it, so I think I don't know how it's split now, but our first part I think was general healthcare science, wasn't it? Our first
Yeah.
kind of section. And then, you have more specifics, and then it kind of goes on to NHS
Yeah,
questions that you'd be expecting from, general things. For the general, I definitely struggled the most on the general bit. I don't know which part you found most difficult.
Yeah.
I found it because there's like the specific ones for cancer genomics, you kind of vary. I went on the genomic test directory and just looked at what tests were offered, familiarized myself with it because I hadn't had any experience before with any of these techniques and stuff. So I really that was probably the main part of my revision as such, was around them, just to make sure I knew why and when they were used and things like that. So that felt I was happy with that because I kind of knew how to revise from it. I definitely looked in the curriculum. I don't know whether you I found the curriculum really helpful, just seeing what the trainee is expected to learn to kind of gauge, because obviously by no means are they expecting you to be able to list off things that you haven't learned them. But yeah, that was definitely really helpful to just know what they offer. For the general part though, I found that element I struggled the most with. But looking back, if I was to give any advice, I would just be look at things that are common for all healthcare scientists.
Yeah.
I was looking at the HCPC standard, just thought it was really helpful to just understand people, so just to understand what every healthcare scientist within the NHS is working to. And obviously, especially, I think it's quite difficult, I don't know if you find this, because with lab stuff, you're removed from the patient. It's so important to keep on almost zooming out and picturing where you are in the pathway and the ultimate effect on the patient. I think it's a bit easier when you're doing audiology or something where you're face to face with the patient and the intervention is done there and then. So I definitely made an effort to understand, okay, this patient would come in at this point, what would they have experienced before their sample comes to me and things like that. The last part of the questioning, I think there's lots of information on NHS interviews in general. Again, obviously goes without saying, really know your values.
Exactly.
Really know the values.
You can't avoid the values. Very important.
Yeah, they will get you in the end, the values. But I would definitely say as well, if I was going to give some advice on the interview, things like values are such an easy thing to bring in earlier on. Don't bank on them asking you necessarily just an open question, a lovely open question at the end of tell me all the values and everything you've done to show me all the values kind of thing. So I would definitely say they're very easy ones that when you're discussing the patient pathway at the beginning, you can very easily slot those values in just to reinforce to the interviewer, okay, this person understands.
How did you prepare for your interview then?
So again, I had a lot of notes written down on how to answer basic interview questions. I think having some real life examples helps when you're kind of answering the questions. You give some examples of things that you've experienced, and also looking at the NHS values. I think so that definitely helps. Yeah. There are certain things about quality as well that would be that I know that were important for the interview. I think what I would say, like the main message about interviews would be that I didn't feel that my experience, my specialist experience really like helped so much. It's more about how you answer those questions, because there are some things that like I said that I didn't know, and I would just say how I would find that information instead of saying the right answer, basically. So I think it's really about how you kind of structure your answer and the way you answer more than what you say.